today's top boxing news.
Ow! Okay, we'll start with this. We now have a date for Jessica McCaskill's mandated title defense against her mandatory challenger from Croatia, Ivana Habazin. It's set to land June 24th on the Berlanga versus Quigley undercard, set to go down in New York 2 months from now. McCaskill versus Habazin will serve as an undercard bout to Edgar Berlanga's Matchroom debut against Irishman Jason Quigley at the Hulu Theater at Madison Square Garden in New York, live worldwide on DAZN. Piranha Promotions originally won the purse bid for the fight at $201,000, outbidding Matchroom's offer of $91,000. The unheralded promoter, however, forfeited the rights and they fell to the next highest bidder, which was Matchroom. As a result, this development, like many others, was first reported by No Smoke Sport. It's my understanding that Ivana Habazin is Jessica McCaskill's mandatory challenger by way of more than one alphabet organization. Thus, in many ways, Jessica would be killing two birds with one stone and freeing up her schedule should she win to have a unification match. There's only one other champion at this weight, newly crowned WBO champion Sandy Ryan. We talked about that. As a result of Piranha Promotions having defaulted on the rights to the fight, 10% of the purse will be reserved for the winner, as is standard in WBC World Title purse bids. McCaskill will get 70% of the remaining 90%, $57,000, while Habazin, the WBC mandatory challenger, is due 30%, which is $24,000. Should McCaskill overcome Habazin, her next fight will likely be a transatlantic unification bout with WBO champion Sandy Ryan, who decisioned Canada's Marie-Pierre Huel last Saturday to win a vacant belt. Promoter Eddie Hearn has declared that a 3-belt unification fight between Ryan and McCaskill is already signed, but No Smoke Sport has confirmed with McCaskill's coach and manager Rick Ramos that the McCaskill versus Ryan bout is not signed yet, but is likely to happen. First, Jessica's got to beat Ivana Habazin, and I think she can. I think she will. Ivana, who sports a professional record at 21 wins with 4 losses, no draws, 7 knockouts, having only ever been knocked out once in 25 professional bouts. To Jessica McCaskill, who sports a professional record of 12 wins with 3 losses, no draws, 5 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 15 professional contests. 15 professional bouts, and those losses. The loss to Katie Taylor, the more recent loss to Chantel Cameron. What that communicates is you have to compete at a certain level to beat Jessica. Ivana Habazin doesn't. Jessica McCaskill saw action 2 times last year. At first in June, opposite the ring, Alma Ibarra. She beat the fuck out of Alma Ibarra. I mean, I picked her to beat Alma, but I didn't think it was going to be that one-sided. It was so one-sided, Alma decided to retire after that fight. Jessica McCaskill was triumphant, but she ran into a wall late last year in November. Opposite the ring, Chantel Cameron. She lost that fight. She's coming right off of that loss, whereas Ivana Habazin, she's coming off a win. A win over Diana Prozac in October of last year, a unanimous decision win. So Jessica's coming off a loss, Ivana's coming off a win. It's the only fight Ivana Habazin's had in the last 2 years. Ivana Habazin, a remnant of the old guard, the old era of female fighters and former champions. She used to be one herself. She used to be IBF welterweight champion. But I have to be honest that I've never been high on Ivana Habazin's boxing, and ahead of this fight, I quite comfortably have Jessica McCaskill outworking her and battering her, similar to what we saw in 2016 when Ivana fought Michaela Lauren. It's going to be that kind of fight. Ivana Habazin's not the least bit athletic. She's slow, flat-footed, no sharpness in her movement, no snap in her punches. Whereas Jessica, if nothing else, she's got an engine and she's got power. Enough power that I think she can overwhelm Ivana Habazin. In similar fashion to Michaela Lauren, when she stopped Ivana Habazin, when she overwhelmed her. I mean, you often hear it said that Jessica has a very uncoordinated style. It's messy, it's scrappy, but it's effective. She's had a lot of success with it. Jessica's a pressure fighter that likes to come in bobbing and weaving, bringing big punches over. She hits hard. You need certain ingredients to beat Jessica McCaskill, and Ivana Habazin ain't bring a bacon sheet. Or an apron. It's not a dynamic between them you have to think too much about. Ivana Habazin doesn't have the feet for this. She's too flat-footed, so in all likelihood, Jessica's gonna catch up to her, and she's gonna end up in a gunfight. She ain't got bigger guns than Jessica. Jessica's messy, but she hits hard. And after that lopsided decision loss to Chantel Cameron, I actually think Jessica's hungry to make a statement. The old saying goes, be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it. And Ivana Habazin, she wanted this. She's got it. And Jessica McCaskill is going to give it to her, stick it to her.
I think she's going to stop Ivana.
So I'm going with Jessica McCaskill by way of knockout or technical knockout in late June on the undercard of Berlanga versus Quigg.
There's still a deal that needs to be done, and we're getting close. I'm optimistic that it will be done. Look, it's Wednesday afternoon. Could happen before Saturday. I would think that more likely it's not going to happen before Saturday, and we'll be announcing it hopefully in the near future.
So with that having been said, when we start talking about Spence and Crawford, and yeah, you did throw a little bit of a cold water on it, unfortunately.
I don't take any pleasure in that.
That's what Stephen Espinoza had to say about a potential Terrence Crawford versus Errol Spence Jr. fight ahead of this weekend's fight. It was felt in many circles, given the scale and size of Davis versus Garcia, that Spence versus Crawford would be announced at some point in that card. And Stephen Espinoza, he let it be known that the deal's not done yet. Word around the campfire, per veteran boxing scribe Steve Kim he's hearing about a potential bout between Sergey Lipinets and Elvis Rodriguez that is being consummated for July to be the co-headliner to a certain welterweight showdown.
There have been a number of dates thrown around for the potential Crawford versus Spence fight. June 17th was one, but it's looking more and more like if the fight is going to happen, it's going to happen in July. And this fight between Sergey and Elvis, may be on the undercard.
If Stephen Espinoza, the PBC, and the people over there at Showtime can get this fight over the line, a fight that's been well over 5 years in the making, this would mark their biggest year in the sport of boxing in some time. Last year was not a big year for them.
What was the biggest fight Showtime put on last year?
Well, the fight that got the most ratings for the network was the Jermel Charlo versus Brian Castano rematch, close to 1 million views on regular Showtime in terms of box office fights.
None of their box office fights, none of their pay-per-views last year brought in big numbers. Not Gervonta Davis's fight, not Deontay Wilder's ring return.
On the heels of this past weekend's fight and how successful that event was, the estimated numbers, the estimated buy rate for the show, as you can imagine, this fight, potentially this fight in tandem with that one, could mark one of the bigger years Showtime has had in boxing in a long time.
A very long time.
Here and now, the appetite for Crawford versus Spence as a conversation may have all but dwindled. The appetite for the conversation, but the appetite for the fight, if they announce it, may galvanize fans.
Because people don't want to talk about it anymore. They've been talking about it for over 5 years.
In the absence of a done deal, in the absence of a fight date and a location, in the absence of an official announcement, people don't want to talk about it anymore.
Argue about it anymore. Who you think wins, who I think wins.
Many have given up hope. I myself have maintained a certain level of skepticism over the years. It wasn't until recently that I started getting the idea that maybe this year is going to be the year. Maybe this year it's going to happen because Showtime Sports, Showtime Boxing is under pressure to deliver big fights and big viewership.
The whole thing they've got going on with Paramount and potentially being merged into that platform. The unstable ground that Showtime Sports, Showtime Boxing might be on. It being that Showtime itself is a story-based network. Most of their subscribers aren't there for sports. They're not there for boxing.
At a time when the platform is trimming the fat and they may be merged into a bigger platform whilst shedding the excess, you have to wonder if boxing, their boxing programming, will be shed in that process.
Thus, the people in the business have to justify their position, justify their continued existence on the platform, pull out all the stops, and deliver the biggest and best fights, the biggest and best numbers they can.
Because if they can't, Showtime Boxing might go the same way that HBO Boxing went. And HBO, they used to be the gold standard, but they left the sport some years ago. Some years later, there's a feeling that Showtime Boxing might share the same fate.
So part of the continued effort to keep Showtime Boxing going, they're trying to make the biggest fights they can. The Davis versus Garcia fight and the potential Crawford versus Spence fight.
At minimum, what we can say is that we got confirmation from Stephen Espinoza that they are, in fact, working on it. They're working on a deal, and I know that that sounds like a broken record. That's all we heard last year.
They're working on it. Stephen's optimistic.
We didn't actually get the fight. Didn't get the fight last year, and last year the fight was long overdue. We're hearing the same thing this year.
They're working on it. Stephen's optimistic.
Which provides little consolation, but that's where it's at. That's where it is. they're still working on it.
And if they get it done for July, it will have been a little over a year's time since Errol Spence Jr. saw action, whereas Terrence was in action more recently in what can only be described as a maintenance fight opposite the ring, David Evanesian, who he stopped in 6 rounds, I think it was.
Not a hot ticket at all, but it was what it was, and what it was a maintenance fight, whereas Errol, if they get this thing done, he's going to have ring rust to shake off.
That's a guy whose career has lost a lot of momentum.
Why nobody wants to argue about it anymore?
Guys fought once in the last 2 years. We're arguing more than he's fighting.
The only thing left to do now is get the deal done. Get the fight over the line to galvanize the fans to regain interest in this contest, regain interest in this fight. And it seems that the powers that be, the sanctioning bodies themselves, they're not getting in the way, because not that long ago, the WBO ordered Terence Crawford to take on Alexis Rocha, his mandatory challenger. And Alexis decided to go his own way. He decided to do his own thing, have another fight, because he's under the impression that Terence is about to fight Errol. Errol, who not that long ago was ordered to fight Keith Thurman.
The order from the WBC for Errol to fight Keith came down about 5-6 months ago in November.
Now, 5 or 6 months later, there's no talk of an Errol Spence Jr. versus Keith Thurman fight, but there is talk of an Errol Spence Jr. versus Terence Crawford fight.
They've got to know that nobody wants to see Errol fight Keith Thurman. They've got to stop making fights like that. Fights that nobody wants, that end up behind a paywall.
Word around the campfire is that Keith Thurman is a backup plan at this point, a contingency in the event that things don't work out between Terence and Errol.
If they do, and they make the fight, I don't know what Keith Thurman's gonna do.
I don't care either. The last 2 or 3 years, he struck me as a quasi-retired fighter.
The focus has to be Spence versus Crawford. Spence versus Crawford and nobody else. There's no other fight to make it welterweight.
Regardless of what side of the fence you're on, whether you're on the Spence side or the Crawford side, both sides should agree that this is the only fight to make it 147.
Anything else is a waste of time.
So let's see if the powers that be don't get this thing done. And finally, in men's lightweight news, per a tweet from Michael Benson, Gervonta Davis has now entered the Ring Magazine Pound for Pound Top 10, where ESPN chose to willfully keep Gervonta Davis out. Ring Magazine has elected to let him in. In truth, I don't abide by either list. I keep my own. Gervonta Davis is not present.
No.
Neither was Ryan Garcia.
Where there was an uproar earlier this week because ESPN snubbed Gervonta Davis, Ring Magazine has elected to vote him in. And in truth,
if you're not a part of the solution, you're part of the problem. There are other fighters out there that are perhaps not as popular in this part of the world as Gervonta Davis.
Right.
That you won't find on Ring Magazine's Pound for Pound list. 4th Division champion Kazuto Ioka almost immediately comes to mind. And what about Kenshiro Taraji, a unified champion?
They're both from Japan.
They're not popular here in the West. Thus, you won't find them on Ring Magazine's Pound for Pound list, because Ring Magazine's list is a popularity contest. When a Pound for Pound list, it's not supposed to be that. It's supposed to be a measurement of skill.
Who are the most skilled fighters in the world, not who are the most popular. And you're making the determination that Gervonta Davis is one of the most skilled fighters in the world because he beat Ryan Garcia.
You waited up until he beat Ryan Garcia before you ranked him, so him beating Ryan must have been what influenced your decision.
There's a lot wrong with Ring Magazine's Pound for Pound list, if I'm being honest, though I don't usually waste a lot of time on it because, like I said, I got my own list.
If you waited good up until Gervonta Davis beat Ryan Garcia, what that communicates is that him beating Ryan is what influenced your decision, because up until that point he wasn't there. But how does beating Ryan, of all people?
That makes him one of the pound for pound best fighters in the world, beating Ryan.
And who did Ryan beat? Who did Ryan Garcia beat? You'll notice that Devin Haney, the lightweight division's undisputed champion, who traveled to Australia 2 times
in order to become an undisputed champion and in order to remain one. He's not on the list.
But you know who is? Gervonta Davis. And you know who else? Vasyl Lomachenko. Vasyl Lomachenko, who, going into this fight with Devin very soon, he's not the champion, he's the challenger.
But Vasyl Lomachenko gets a rank and Devin doesn't.
Now, if Vasyl Lomachenko wins, and becomes a champion again, becomes the lightweight division's undisputed champion, then surely that warrants a rank. But up until that happens, how is he there and Devin isn't? How is Gervonta there? This is what I mean when I say you're either part of the solution or you're part of the problem.
They made it very hard at Ring Magazine for Jermell Charlo to crack the list. Very hard. It took some doing, took some time before he was integrated into their pound-for-pound rank standings. Whereas for Gervonta, they've made it very easy. Where Jermell Charlo had to clean house against the best and brightest fighters at junior middleweight, all Gervonta had to do was beat Ryan.
Jermell Charlo had to go through then WBC champion Tony Harrison, Jason Rosario, Brian Castano. 2 times he had to become an undisputed champion before he was even considered, whereas Gervonta, he gets on the list just for beating Ryan.
That's it. He ain't got to unify. He ain't got to fight the champions at his own weight. All he's got to do, beat Ryan.
That's it. It's almost like they're rewarding him for circumventing the real fighters and the real competition at his prescribed weight. And the real fighters at his weight, you know, it's not Ryan Garcia, it's Devin Haney, it's Vasyl Lomachenko.
Ryan don't got a more robust body of work than those guys. He ain't got the resume those guys got. Even if you don't think that those particular fighters are pound-for-pound fighters, neither is Ryan.
Even if you don't think they're pound-for-pound fighters, they're still 2 of the better guys in the lightweight division. Better than Ryan.
You're either part of the solution or you're part of the problem. I view periodicals like this as being part of the problem.
I understand that this past weekend's fight was a massive success commercially, that they sold a lot of pay-per-views with that thing, but what the hell does that have to do with the pound-for-pound list?
It just feels like they decided to add him to the list due to his popularity as opposed to his accolades, because Ryan was never a champion at lightweight or super lightweight. There are plenty of guys at or around those same weights that have better resumes than he does. So how is he the gatekeeper to entering the pound for pound?
It doesn't make sense, but these lists seldom ever do.
And that's why I don't abide by them, whether it's ESPN or Ring Magazine.
You don't even rank Devin Haney, a reigning undisputed champion in the 4-belt era, as one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the sport, for cleaning house at lightweight. You don't rank him.
Then why should any fighter fight for world titles? Why should any fighter fight to become an undisputed champion if you're not going to reward him for it?
You're not going to rank him. It sends the wrong message.
And that's how I feel about it.